Dobrodošli, or welcome. The summer is on its way out. It is still bringing its gifts, but it's definitely on its way out. So this week we're focusing on stocking our winter larder with things that we can pick and cut fresh for the freezer, and also we're going to make some jam, I think.
Bok, I'm Mandy O. This is Grow, Make, Cook, and welcome to my garden. I grew up in Australia in a permaculture family, but after we got married, Mr. O and I moved here to his home country of Croatia. I am a passionate and hands-on homemaker and gardener, and I love life's simple pleasures. So join me on my journey, and together we can learn to grow, make, and cook. Preparing for the incoming cold characterises the second week in September, Oruyan.
Like a lot of people, I keep a little cup with a bunch of herbs on my kitchen window. But one of them has been there for quite a while, as you can see by this mass of roots, which is shot out of this one here in the middle. This is basil. And so today I'm going to put the rest of this back, but I'm going to pot up that basil because the season for basil is almost over, and I adore basil. So all I did with this was just chopped it, stuck it in some water, and I've been using the leaves off of it. But now what I'm going to do is just pot it up, which means I've just got some compost in a little pot, and I'm going to bring this inside so that it doesn't get wrecked by the ravages, which is the cold that's coming and really starting to make itself known. I'm just going to make a little hole in this compost that I've just put in here. Just dig a little hole like that. And then I'm just going to pop him in nice and deep so that all those roots are covered. Sprouting things in a jar of water on your windowsill is a lovely and very easy way to try and get more plants. Just fill him in, making sure that he's not covering any of those lower leaf joints. And I'll give him a good water. And now this guy will live inside until next spring. I'm not going to feed him an awful lot like I would with basil that's actively growing outside, because he won't get so much sunshine. He's going to grow very, very slowly. The idea of this is just to keep him sort of ticking over until next spring, when I can plant this fellow out again. While we're doing some propagating ready for winter, autumn, all of that business, I've decided I really like this tomato. It's been a great one. It's nothing like the shape that I thought it was, but it's been delicious. It's made fantastic tomato salads and all sorts of things. So I'm taking some of these cuts off, and I'm just going to take off some lower leaves. Now, all of these joints where the leaves were actually are a good spot for sprouting roots. So I'll take off both of those, and those will both get buried, maybe even the third one. The more stem you've got underground for a tomato, the more area that can grow roots. So I'm just pinching off every little bit out of that so that it has very little leaf, because the leaves are where it loses the water, and lots of stem underground, which means it's got lots of spots for it to make roots. Then what I'm doing is I'm digging a really deep hole in there, and I'm going to put it right down as far as I can almost into that compost, so that all of that is covered. In fact, I'm going to add some more compost in a second. But I want this compost as high up as I can possibly get it to encourage the most amount of roots possible. And then I'm going to cover him over inside. I'm also going to chop off some of this top leaf, so he's got very little leaf, so he doesn't lose very much water, and hopefully this guy will sprout some roots and we can save the plants for next year. My recipe for my jam is really very simple. I'm just adding all of the strawberries and blackberries and black currants and everything that we've picked, really. It's been a terrible year for most fruits, so it's a little bit of everything in the jam this year. And this goes with about 1 lemon per kilo of fruit. So I have about 4 kilos of fruit in total, and I have already added the juice of 2 lemons, and I will add the juice of 2 more. To my great big mix of berries, I'm adding about 1 small apple worth of apple. This is just to give it some pectin and increase the acid a little bit. Everything that I'm using though is a high acid fruit. Strawberries, sour cherries, black currants and blackberries are all safe to turn into jam on their own. So because they've got so much acid in them, they're never going to run the risk of harbouring botulism and poisoning people. If something does go wrong with the seal on a jam for something like this, you're going to see it and smell it because it'll go mouldy, and then you'll know it's not good to eat anymore. But this little apple, along with the other little one, because they're both very titchy. It's been a terrible fruit year, but because the apples are so small, I'm using 2, which would be equal to 1 normal small apple. Now comes the long, slow, and rather tedious task of stirring this and letting it cook down until it gets quite thick. This will take hours. It smells so good. And now that it's getting nice and liquidy, I'm going to start adding in the other ingredients. So for each kilo of fruit, and I had about 4, I add 2 tablespoons of sugar. Now I'll let you in on my secret. I use a mix of sugar. So for 1 of my, a level tablespoon, so for 1 of my kilos, I'm going to put brown sugar. And then the second kilo of fruit will get white. Make them level. We don't want too much. We don't want to get ourselves hooked on the sugar stuff. 2 for the second kilo, and I'll keep going. I might just do 2 types, but mix up your sugars. It'll vary the flavour of your jam. So if you've got really dark sugar, you can do that too. That makes a really caramelly rich flavour. And I'm just using, I think I'll do more raw, so that's the last 2. And mixing up your different sugar types just adds that extra depth of sweetness. So you don't actually need that much. Well, usually when I make jams, especially a long cooked jam like this, I would pop them into a boiling water bath for the amount of time that is listed on the recipe. For a mixed berry jam like this, which is very high in acid, you would put them in just under a ½ litre jar, and then here at our altitude you would process them for about 15 minutes according to the recipe I'm given. So I'm not going to do that because there was so little jam. This actually cooked down so far. By the time it got to the gel point, by the time it started to thicken up properly, there was so little left that it's really only going to fill 1 jar, and we can eat that inside the time frame that you would normally use it inside the fridge. Now, just here next to where I've put my turnips, I'm going to sow some corn salad or matovilats. Now, marigolds is something that's really commonly used as a salad here, and I've been preparing the ground a little bit. I have already kind of raked this over a little bit, so it is a bit rough, but marigolds is quite a tough plant. It's called corn salad because it's sometimes used to just spring up in between rows of corn, and it would start about now, and it's quite frost hardy, so hopefully it'll go into winter. Now, all I have really done is broken up this topsoil a bit, gotten rid of the big chunky bits, and then I'm just going to lightly sprinkle these all over, almost wild sowing them, kind of freehand sprinkling them in a kind of wide trough. Now these normally would be spaced maybe 5 centimeters, maybe less apart, and this will hopefully do that for me, but mostly what I'm trying to do is just get a nice wide sort of patch of them rather than a single row. And then, so as I can see where I've put it, I've got some sifted compost, which is quite a bit darker, that I'm just going to gently use my pot trick and sift over the top, just more to mark my row than anything else, and to cover them lightly. The last thing to do is give them a good thorough drink with a nice gentle rose attachment on your watering can, because if you use a single stream, you'll actually wash these little tiny seeds away and they'll all end up clumped up in one spot, just like happened with my endive up there. Now here, in amongst the forming butternuts and sprawling tomatoes, I have, more tomatoes coming actually, but I have my American marigolds. Now these, you'll probably remember I planted in here quite close to the end of their planting season, just as a way to sort of brighten up the garden and as a companion plant to my squash and tomatoes. Now, these flowers have been glorious and they've started to go over, and American marigolds are one of the easiest plants to save seeds from. Just remove the top flower bit, holding on to the stem of the flower, and then crack him open and you should see, there they are, all of these lovely seeds come out. So from one flower, from one plant, I've probably got a dozen more seeds there, maybe more. And if half of those sprout, I have, from one flower, gotten 6 new plants. There we go. From that second one, I've got almost as many seeds as from the first. Beautiful. All right, now to store these, I'm going to pop them in a paper envelope until we get to about March, April time, when we'll sow these out and we can do that together. Ready for flowers for next year. It's been great to start getting things ready for winter, taking cuttings, making jam, getting things going. What are your favourite jobs to do in the garden before the winter chill really sets in? Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, I think that's all we've got time for today. If you like what we're doing, remember to like the video, and if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. If you want notifications, use the bell icon below, and until next time then, do widzenia.